Hi, I'm Hazel. I'm 28. 3 weeks ago, I walked into my cousin's graduation party with a gift bag in my hand and hope in my chest, and I walked out with a skull fracture and the sickening realization that family can be the most dangerous place on earth. What time are you hearing this? Where are you sitting? Your bedroom? Your car? Walking somewhere safe? Drop a comment below because I read every single one, and I want to know who's listening while I tell you about the night everything changed. The night I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protecting from. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I told myself I was going because it was the right thing to do. Because Tyler was family. Even when he made my skin crawl. Even when his success felt like a spotlight that made me invisible. That's what I kept repeating as I drove through the familiar streets of suburban Phoenix, clutching the steering wheel like it could anchor me to something solid. The party was everything I expected and worse. Aunt Carol had turned their backyard into a shrine to Tyler's achievements. Medical school acceptance banners stretched between palm trees like prayer flags. String lights hung in perfect arcs over a pool that reflected the golden hour light. Tables groaned under catered food that probably cost more than my monthly rent. This wasn't celebration. This was worship. 60-something people filled the space, all of them orbiting around Tyler like he was the sun, and they were desperate for his warmth. I stood at the edge of it all, gift bag in hand, watching my cousin hold court near the pool. He looked exactly like what he was, a 22-year-old golden boy who'd never met a door that didn't open for him. Pre-med graduate, star athlete, future doctor. The kind of man who collected achievements like trophies and wore charm like armor. He saw me, made eye contact across the crowd, and gave me that smile, the one that looked warm from a distance but felt cold up close. Then he turned back to his audience, dismissing me without a word. I should have left then, should have dropped the gift on the nearest table and driven home to my quiet apartment and my nursing textbooks. But I stayed, like an idiot, like someone who still believed in fairy tales where families love you just for existing. Hazel! Aunt Carol appeared beside me like she'd materialized from thin air. She looked perfect, as always. Hair styled to within an inch of its life, makeup flawless despite the Arizona heat, dress that probably cost more than my car payment. "You came," she said, and there was something in her voice. Surprise? Disappointment? How nice. Nice. Like I was charity work. Like showing up to my cousin's graduation party deserved a medal. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied, holding out the gift bag. "Congratulations to Tyler." She took it without looking inside, already scanning the crowd for more important people to charm. You know, nursing is such a practical career. Not everyone's cut out for the real challenges of medicine. The words hit like a slap, but I smiled anyway. I've been practicing that smile my whole life, the one that said, "Thank you for dismissing my dreams," and "I'm grateful for the crumbs." Tyler certainly set the bar high, I managed. He has, hasn't he? Her eyes found him across the yard, and her face transformed. Pure maternal pride mixed with something sharper. Possession, maybe? Medical school at Johns Hopkins? Can you imagine? My Tyler saving lives. I wanted to say that nurses save lives too, that I'd spent 3 years learning to advocate for patients, to recognize when something was wrong, to document everything because sometimes the evidence is all that stands between life and death. But I didn't. I just nodded and let her float away to the next group of admirers. The party swirled around me like a fever dream. Tyler's medical school friends clustered near the bar, all sharp teeth and sharper ambitions. Family members I barely recognized pinched my cheeks and asked me when I was going to find a nice boy and settle down. College buddies from his baseball team took turns slapping his back and calling him Doc, like the title was already his. And Madison, Tyler's younger sister, hovered at the edges, 19 and nervous, jumping every time her brother looked her way. I watched her flinch when he put his arm around her shoulders for a photo, watched her forced smile when he squeezed just a little too tight, the kind of squeeze that looked affectionate to everyone else but felt like a warning to her. "Madison!" I said when I caught her alone by the dessert table. How are you? Ready for sophomore year? She startled like I'd shouted. Oh, Hazel, hi! Yeah, I'm good, great! Tyler's been helping me with my course schedule. She glanced toward her brother automatically, like she was checking for permission to speak. That's nice of him, I said carefully. Are you still thinking about pre-med? Something flickered in her eyes. Fear? Sadness? Tyler thinks I should consider something more realistic? Maybe business or communications? He says not everyone has what it takes for medicine. The way she said it, like she was reciting lines, made my chest tight. But before I could respond, Tyler appeared beside us with that golden boy grin. "There's my favorite cousin," he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just long enough to feel wrong. "Madison, go help Mom with the photos, the family ones." It wasn't a request. Madison scurried away without looking back. "Hazel," Tyler said, stepping just slightly too close. "Still playing nurse, I see. That's cute." "Still learning to save lives," I replied, keeping my voice light. "Congratulations on Johns Hopkins. Really impressive." His smile sharpened. "Thanks. Though, between you and me, it wasn't exactly difficult. When you have the right background, the right recommendations." He shrugged like it was all inevitable. "Some people are just meant for bigger things." The casual cruelty in his voice made my skin crawl. But I smiled anyway, because that's what I did. That's what I'd always done. "You know what we need?" Tyler announced suddenly, loud enough for the nearby groups to hear. "Some real fun. I've been telling everyone about my baseball days, but I think it's time for a demonstration." A cheer went up from his college friends. Someone started chanting, "Demo, demo!" And soon, half the party was looking our way with the eager expressions of people hungry for entertainment. Tyler's eyes locked on mine, and something cold slithered down my spine. "Hazel," Tyler said, pointing the bat at me like a conductor's baton. "Come here. I need someone to demonstrate proper positioning." My feet felt rooted to the ground. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to make an excuse, to get as far away from Tyler and his bat as possible, but 60 pairs of eyes were watching, waiting, and the weight of family expectation pressed down on my shoulders like a lead blanket. "I don't think I'm the right person for this," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Maybe one of your baseball buddies." "Don't be modest," Tyler said, walking toward me with that predatory smile. "You're perfect for this. Trust me." Trust me, the words hit like ice water, because suddenly I remembered where I'd heard them before. Every family gathering, every time Tyler wanted to play a game that left someone crying. "Trust me," he'd say, right before the trust got broken. But I walked forward anyway, because saying no to Tyler at his own party felt impossible, because disappointing family felt worse than whatever was coming, because I was still that little girl who'd rather get hurt than cause a scene. Tyler positioned me about 6 feet away from him, just close enough that I could see the flecks of amber in his brown eyes, just close enough to feel dangerous. "Now," he said to the crowd, raising the bat, "the key is to really follow through. You can't hold back. You've got to swing like you mean it." I opened my mouth to protest, to step back, to do something, but Tyler was already in motion, his body coiling like a spring. The bat came around in a perfect arc, and I had just enough time to think that he really was as good as everyone said he was. Then the world exploded into pain and darkness, and I learned that sometimes family doesn't catch you when you fall. Sometimes they're the ones who push you down. The last thing I remember clearly is the sound. Not the crack of the bat against my skull. That came and went too fast for my brain to process. It was the silence that followed. The sudden, absolute hush that fell over 60 people like someone had pressed a mute button on the world. Then I was on the ground, and everything was wrong. The concrete beneath my cheek felt cold and gritty. Something warm and wet was pooling under my head, and when I tried to move, my vision went sideways. Not blurry, sideways, like someone had tilted the entire universe 15 degrees to the left. "Oh my God," someone whispered, a woman's voice, high and sharp with shock. "Is she—" Another voice, male, young, one of Tyler's friends. "She's fine," Tyler's voice cut through the murmur, loud and sure. "Just got her bell rung a little. Happens all the time in sports." I tried to sit up, tried to say that I wasn't fine, that something was very wrong inside my head. But my tongue felt thick and uncooperative, and the world spun like a broken carnival ride. "Hazel, honey, can you hear me?" Aunt Carol's voice floated down from somewhere above me. When I managed to crack my eyes open, her face swam in and out of focus. "You just had a little tumble. Nothing serious." Nothing serious. I wanted to laugh, but laughing felt like it might crack my skull open the rest of the way. My nursing training was screaming at me through the fog of pain and confusion. Loss of consciousness, disorientation, possible skull fracture. This was the opposite of nothing serious. "We should call an ambulance," someone said, a man's voice I didn't recognize. "Absolutely not," Aunt Carol's tone could cut glass. "She's just shaken up. We don't need to make a scene over a little accident." Accident. The word bounced around my damaged brain like a pinball. Was it an accident? My memories of the moment before impact were fuzzy, but I could swear Tyler had been looking right at me when he swung. Could swear he'd seen exactly where I was standing. "Here, let me help you up." Tyler's hands were on my shoulders, lifting me into a sitting position. To everyone else, it probably looked like concern, but his grip was just slightly too tight, his fingers finding the pressure points that would hurt if I tried to pull away. "I'm dizzy," I managed to whisper. "Of course you are," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "You were always clumsy. Remember when we were kids? You were always falling down, walking into things." I stared at him, trying to focus through the pain. We'd never played together as kids. I'd spent most family gatherings reading in quiet corners, avoiding Tyler's games, because they always seemed to end with someone getting hurt. But the way he said it, so casual and confident, made me doubt my own memories. "Should we really not call someone?" A different voice now, older. Uncle David, Dad's brother, the retired police detective who'd stepped in as my father figure after the accident that took Dad's life. She hit her head pretty hard. "David, please." Aunt Carol's voice had that edge it got when she was being challenged. "I know my own backyard. I saw what happened. Tyler was demonstrating his swing and Hazel stumbled backward. She lost her balance and fell. End of story." But that wasn't what happened. Even through the fog of concussion, I knew that wasn't what happened. The bat had hit me. I'd felt the impact, heard the sickening sound of wood meeting bone. But when I tried to speak, to correct the narrative that was already hardening around me like concrete, Tyler's fingers dug deeper into my shoulders. "You're probably confused," he said, his voice gentle and understanding. "Head injuries can do that, make you remember things wrong." The crowd was nodding, murmuring agreement. "Poor Hazel, always so fragile. Tyler's such a good cousin, helping her up, explaining what really happened." The story was already being written, and I was just a character in Tyler's version of events. "I think I'd need to go to the hospital," I said, louder this time. "My head really hurts." "Of course it does," Aunt Carol said, crouching down beside me. "But you'll be fine. A little ice, some rest, good as new. We can't have you missing Tyler's big night over a silly bump." Silly bump? I touched my fingertips to the side of my head, and they came away red. Not a little red, a lot red. Enough red that several people in the crowd gasped when they saw it. "That's a lot of blood," Uncle David said, his voice sharp with concern. "Carol, I really think
It's nothing, interrupted Tyler. Head wounds always bleed more than they should. Lots of blood vessels up there. I learned that in anatomy class. He was right, technically. Head wounds do bleed disproportionately. But the casual way he said it, like he'd been expecting to need that information, made my damaged brain lurch with suspicion. Please, I whispered, looking up at Uncle David. I think something's really wrong. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who'd seen enough head injuries to know the difference between a bump and a fracture.
That's it, he said, pulling out his phone. I'm calling 911. David, no. Aunt Carol's voice was sharp now, all pretense of concern dropped. You're overreacting. She's fine. Tell him, Tyler. But Tyler had gone very still beside me, his hands frozen on my shoulders. When I turned to look at him, his face was a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. In those eyes, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice water. Satisfaction. It was gone in an instant, replaced by perfect cousin-like worry. But I'd seen it, that flash of pleased surprise, like he'd accomplished exactly what he'd set out to do. Tyler? Aunt Carol prompted. Of course she's fine, he said, but his voice was just slightly off, like an actor who'd missed his cue. Just shaken up. Maybe Uncle David's right, though. Better safe than sorry. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as everyone else, but Uncle David was already dialing, his stubborn line I remembered from childhood. When Uncle David made up his mind about something, you didn't change it. This is ridiculous, Aunt Carol muttered, but she stepped back as Uncle David spoke to the emergency dispatcher. The next few minutes passed in a blur of sirens and flashing lights and paramedics who asked questions I couldn't quite answer. Did I lose consciousness? Maybe. How long was I out? No one could agree. What was my pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? Somewhere around 15. Through it all, Tyler stayed close. The concerned cousin. The pre-med student who understood medical terminology and could explain to the paramedics exactly what had happened. An accident, he told them. A demonstration gone wrong. His cousin had stumbled and fallen, hit her head on the concrete. Did anyone see the actual fall? One of the paramedics asked. I did, Tyler said immediately. I was right there. She lost her balance and went down backwards. But Uncle David stepped forward, his cop instincts finally overriding family politics. That's not what I saw, he said quietly. I saw the bat make contact. The silence that followed was different from the first one. This wasn't shock. This was the held breath of people realizing that something much more serious had just been suggested. You're mistaken, Aunt Carol said quickly. You were across the yard helping with chairs. You couldn't have seen clearly. I saw clearly enough, Uncle David replied, his eyes never leaving Tyler's face. The bat hit her. Full swing. Tyler's mask slipped again just for a second, long enough for me to see the calculation behind his eyes, the rapid assessment of damage control needed. Then the concerned cousin was back, shaking his head sadly. Uncle David's upset, he said to the paramedics. He's always been protective of Hazel since her dad died, but I was holding the bat. I know I didn't make contact. She fell before the swing was complete. It was a good story, plausible, delivered with exactly the right amount of regretful certainty. And it might have worked if not for the paramedic who was examining my head wound. This impact pattern, she said to her partner, too quietly for the family to hear, it's not consistent with a fall. But I heard it. Even through the fog of pain and confusion, I heard it. And I tucked it away in the part of my brain that was still working, still cataloging evidence like I had been trained to do. The ambulance ride was a blur of questions and tests and forms to sign. Uncle David insisted on riding with me, his presence a solid anchor in the chaos. As we pulled away from the house, I caught a glimpse of Tyler through the small window. He was already back to charming the remaining guests, regaling them with the story of his heroic concern for his injured cousin. But Aunt Carol stood apart from the group, her phone pressed to her ear. Even from a distance, I could see the sharp, urgent gestures of someone doing damage control. Hazel, Uncle David said softly, leaning close so the paramedics couldn't hear. What really happened back there? I wanted to tell him, wanted to pour out all my suspicions and fears and the growing certainty that Tyler had hurt me on purpose. But my head felt like it was full of broken glass and the words wouldn't come together right. I don't know, I whispered. I think I think he meant to do it. Uncle David's face went very still. Are you sure? No, I admitted. I can't remember clearly, but something feels wrong. Really wrong. He nodded, his expression grim. Then we're gonna figure out what that something is. The ambulance hit a bump and pain exploded through my skull like fireworks. I closed my eyes and tried to hold on to consciousness, tried to stay present for whatever was coming next, because somehow I knew this was just the beginning. The first move in a game I didn't understand yet, but one I was already losing. In the distance, I could hear the paramedic radioing ahead to the hospital. Possible skull fracture, she was saying. Suspicious circumstances. Patient reports confusion about the incident. Suspicious circumstances. The words echoed in my damaged brain as the ambulance wailed through the Phoenix streets. For the first time since the bat connected with my head, I felt something other than pain and confusion. I felt the first stirring of anger. Shuffle of scrubs and white coats moving between curtained areas. But experiencing it as a patient instead of a student was like seeing the Matrix from the inside. Suddenly, all the sounds felt sharper, more urgent, more personal. Hazel Jackson, 28, possible skull fracture from blunt force trauma. The paramedic rattled off my stats to the triage nurse, like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person who'd just had her world cracked open, along with her skull. But then a familiar voice cut through the medical jargon, and I felt the first real relief I'd experienced since Tyler's bat found my head. I'll take this one. Dr. Amelia Wright appeared at my bedside like an answer to a prayer I hadn't known I was praying. She'd been my supervisor during my ER rotation 6 months ago, the kind of doctor who could spot a lie from across the room and had no patience for anything that wasn't the absolute truth. If anyone could help me figure out what had really happened tonight, it was her. Well, well, she said, her sharp eyes already scanning the paramedic's notes. What brings one of my best nursing students back to my ER as a patient? Family gathering, gone wrong, I managed, trying to smile through the pounding in my head. Dr. Wright's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, the same look she got when a patient's story didn't quite add up. Let's get you into trauma 2 and see what we're dealing with. The next hour was a blur of tests and scans and questions that felt like pop quizzes I wasn't prepared for. What year is it? Who's the president? Can you follow my finger with your eyes? The neurological assessment was standard protocol, but having it performed on me instead of watching from the sidelines was surreal. Your CT scan shows a hairline fracture to the temporal bone, Dr. Wright said, pulling up the images on her tablet. You've got a significant concussion, some swelling, and you're going to feel like hell for the next few weeks. But the good news is there's no bleeding in the brain. I stared at the scan, my nursing training kicking in despite the fog in my head. The fracture line was clean, diagonal across the temporal region, the kind of impact pattern you'd see from a focused blow, rather than a diffuse fall. Doctor, I said carefully, what kind of force would it take to cause this pattern? She looked at me sharply. Why do you ask? Because the family is saying I fell and hit the concrete, but this doesn't look like a fall injury to me. Dr. Wright was quiet for a long moment, studying the scan. Then she pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down, never a good sign in the ER. You're right, she said quietly. This is a direct impact injury. Something struck your head with significant force. The fracture pattern, the depth of the wound, this wasn't caused by falling backwards onto concrete. The relief of having my suspicions confirmed was almost overwhelming. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't confused. Something had hit me, and it had hit me hard. There's something else, Dr. Wright continued. The paramedic noted that the family seemed resistant to calling for help. That's unusual in cases of obvious head trauma. They kept saying it was just roughhousing,
My aunt insisted I was fine. Were you conscious when the injury occurred? I tried to remember, but the moments before impact were still fuzzy. I think so, at least until it happened. And do you remember what caused the injury? This was the question I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. The moment where I had to decide whether to voice my suspicions or keep playing the role of the confused victim. My cousin Tyler was demonstrating a baseball swing. He positioned me near him, maybe 6 feet away. Then he swung the bat, and I touched the bandage on my head. This happened. Dr. Wright's expression went very still. He swung a baseball bat with you standing 6 feet away? He said he was showing off his high school form. Everyone was watching, waiting for the demonstration. And the family claims you fell? They say I stumbled backward and hit the concrete, but I don't remember falling. I remember the bat and then nothing. Dr. Wright was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the tablet. I could see her processing, weighing medical evidence against family dynamics, professional obligations against personal suspicions. Hazel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you think your cousin hit you on purpose? The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. This was it, the moment where I either voiced what my gut was telling me or chose the safer path of family loyalty and plausible denial. I don't know, I said honestly. My memory of the exact moment is fuzzy. But something feels wrong about the whole thing. The way he positioned me, the way the family reacted afterwards, it doesn't add up. Dr. Wright nodded like this was exactly what she had expected to hear. She's pulling up my chart on her tablet and began typing notes. I'm documenting everything, the injury pattern, the circumstances as you remember them, and the family's response to emergency services. I'm also taking photographs of your injuries for the medical record. Is that normal?
It's standard protocol for suspicious injuries. And Hazel? She looked at me directly. Your instincts about this being wrong, trust them. Your medical training is an asset here, not a liability. You know what normal trauma patterns look like, and you know this isn't one of them. A knock at the curtain interrupted us. Uncle David poked his head in, his face creased with worry. How is she, Doc? Dr. Wright glanced at me, and I nodded. Uncle David was safe. Uncle David was an ally. Skull fracture, significant concussion, she said. She's going to need monitoring for the next 24 hours and several weeks of recovery time. Uncle David's jaw tightened. Skull fracture from falling on concrete? Actually, Dr. Wright said carefully, the injury pattern is more consistent with a direct blow to the head, something like a baseball bat, for instance. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Uncle David's cop instincts were clearly firing on all cylinders, and I could see him reassessing everything he'd witnessed at the party. I saw the bat make contact, he said quietly. I told the paramedics, but the family, they have a different version of events. Family members often have different recollections of traumatic incidents, but medical evidence doesn't lie. She excused herself to check on other patients, leaving Uncle David and me alone in the sterile privacy of the trauma bay. He pulled the chair close to my bed and leaned forward like he was about to share state secrets. Hazel, I need you to listen to me carefully, he said. I've seen enough suspicious injuries in my career to know one when I see it, and I've also seen enough family cover-ups to recognize the pattern. You think Tyler hit me on purpose? I think Tyler swung a baseball bat with you standing 6 feet away, and I think he knew exactly where you were when he did it. Uncle David's voice was grim. The question is whether we can prove it. How? The same way we prove any case. Evidence, documentation, witnesses. You're already ahead of the game because you understand medical terminology and evidence collection. That's not going to be lost on Tyler or his mother. As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Carol.
"So sorry about the accident. Let me know how you're feeling. Tyler is beside himself with worry." I showed the message to Uncle David, who read it with a deepening frown. Accident? She's already decided on the narrative. What do I do? First, you get better. Doctor's orders take priority over everything else. But while you're recovering, you document everything. Every detail you remember, every conversation, every attempt to control the story, and you start asking questions about whether this has happened before. You think Tyler has done this before? I think golden boys don't usually develop skills like precision violence overnight. This felt practice to me. The thought sent ice through my veins. Tyler, with his medical school acceptance and his charming smile and his devoted mother, systematically hurting people and getting away with it because no one wanted to believe the worst about the family favorite? I need copies of all my medical records and photos of the injuries, everything documented. Uncle David smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. Now you're thinking like an investigator. Dr. Wright returned with discharge papers and a stern lecture about head injury protocol. No driving for 72 hours, no alcohol, return immediately if symptoms worsened. But as she handed me the paperwork, she slipped me something else, a business card for a lawyer who specialized in assault cases. "Just in case," she said quietly. As Uncle David helped me to his car, I caught my reflection in the lobby windows. Bandaged head, bruised face, eyes that looked too wide and too haunted. I looked like exactly what I was, a victim of violence. But I also looked like something else. Someone who was done being silent, done making excuses, done protecting people who didn't deserve protection. The drive home was quiet, Uncle David navigating through late-night Phoenix traffic while I processed everything that had happened. The medical evidence was clear. Someone had hit me with a baseball bat. The family's story was falling apart under the weight of facts in physics. And somewhere in the growing clarity of my anger, a plan was beginning to form. Tyler thought he'd gotten away with it, thought his charm and his mother's damage control and the family's need for harmony would sweep this under the rug like it had never happened. He thought he was dealing with the same quiet, compliant Hazel who had spent her whole life avoiding conflict and keeping peace. He was wrong. I was still that nursing student who'd learned to advocate for patients who couldn't advocate for themselves. I was still the daughter of a paramedic who taught me that documentation could save lives. And I was definitely still the niece of a retired detective who just offered to teach me how to build a case. Tyler had made one critical mistake tonight. He picked the wrong victim. And now I was going to make sure he learned exactly how wrong he'd been. The headache started 3 days after I got home from the hospital. Not the dull ache I expected from a concussion, but sharp, stabbing reminders every time I tried to push past my doctor-ordered rest. My body was forcing me to be still, to think, to remember. And the more I remembered, the angrier I got. I turned my dining table into a war room, medical records spread across one end, a timeline sketched on legal paper down the middle, and my laptop open to Tyler's social media accounts. If Tyler had hurt me deliberately, I needed to know if he'd done it before. Uncle David had taught me that predators don't usually start with skull fractures, they work up to them. The first breakthrough came from my mother's old photo albums. I'd borrowed them under the pretense of scanning family pictures for a digital archive, but I was really looking for evidence. What I found made my stomach turn. Easter 2019. Cousin Sarah with a black eye, smiling for the camera while Tyler's arm wrapped around her shoulders. Christmas 2020. Madison with a bandaged wrist, Tyler holding her other hand possessively. 4th of July 2021. 3 different female cousins with visible bruises or cuts, all of them standing near Tyler in group shots. I'd seen these photos before, but I'd never really looked at them. The injuries had been explained away, soccer mishaps, clumsiness, rough play. But now, lined up chronologically, they told a different story. Tyler collected damaged girls like trophies. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Aunt Carol's name flashed on the screen, and for a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail. But I needed to hear what damage control narrative she was crafting. "Hazel, sweetheart." Her voice was honey-sweet with concern. "How are you feeling? Tyler's been so worried about you." "I'm managing," I said carefully. "Still pretty sore." Of course you are. That was such a scary fall. But the doctor said you'll be fine, right? No permanent damage? Fall. She was still sticking with that story. Actually, the doctor said it was a direct impact injury from something like a baseball bat. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, doctors sometimes get these things wrong, honey. They weren't there. We all saw what happened. You lost your balance and went down. Tyler feels terrible about it. Does he? He's beside himself. In fact, he wanted me to ask if you've talked to anyone about pressing charges or anything ridiculous like that. Because obviously this was just an accident, and we wouldn't want any misunderstandings to affect his medical school placement. There it was, the real reason for the call. Tyler was worried about his future, and Aunt Carol was doing reconnaissance to see if I planned to threaten it. I haven't talked to anyone about pressing charges, I said truthfully. I'm still trying to understand what happened. Good. That's good. Because family protects family, Hazel. We don't air our dirty laundry in public, especially over accidents. After she hung up, I stared at my timeline. 3 years of accidents involving Tyler and female family members. 3 years of Aunt Carol's damage control. 3 years of protecting the golden boy at everyone else's expense. I picked up my phone and called the one person who might give me honest answers about Tyler's past. Hazel? Madison's voice was surprised, cautious. Are you okay? Mom said you had a bad fall. Madison, can we talk? Not about the party. About Tyler. About growing up with him. Another long silence. When Madison spoke again, her voice was smaller, younger. I can't. He said if anyone asks questions about him, I should call Mom immediately. He told you that? After the party. He said people might try to make trouble for him because of his medical school acceptance, that jealous family members might spread lies. My heart broke a little for this 19-year-old girl who'd been trained to protect her abuser. Madison, I'm not trying to make trouble. I just want to understand why I ended up in the hospital. You fell, she said automatically. Everyone saw you fall. Did they? Or did everyone see what Tyler wanted them to see? I heard her sharp intake of breath. I have to go. Mom's calling. The line went dead, but I'd heard enough. Madison was scared, and Tyler had already gotten to her. But her fear told me more than her words had. You don't coach someone on what to say unless there's something that needs hiding. That night, Uncle David stopped by with Chinese takeout and updates from his own investigation. He'd been making calls to his old contacts, quietly asking about domestic violence patterns and how abusers operated within families. He talked to a detective who specializes in family abuse cases, he said, spreading lo mein between my medical records. She says what Tyler did, the public demonstration, the immediate gaslighting, the family pressure to minimize, it's textbook predator behavior. So this isn't his first time? Probably not even close. The fact that he positioned you exactly where he wanted you, in front of an audience, suggests he's done this before. The audience becomes witnesses to his concern afterward, and their presence makes it harder for victims to immediately call out what really happened. I showed him the photos I found, watching his expression grow grimmer with each image. Jesus, Hazel, this goes back years. That's what I thought. But how do I prove it? Everyone in these photos would swear Tyler never hurt them. The family has too much invested in protecting him. Uncle David leaned back in his chair, his cop brain clearly working. You don't need them to admit it. You just need to establish a pattern. Medical records, school incident reports, anything that creates a paper trail of Tyler's accidents.
Over the next week, I became a detective in my own family's history. I called distant relatives under the pretense of checking on old injuries, asking innocent questions about hospital visits and emergency room trips. The picture that emerged was damning. Cousin Sarah's black eye had required 3 stitches. Madison's sprained wrist had actually been fractured. Tyler's high school girlfriend had transferred schools after a series of accidents that left her with a broken nose and 2 cracked ribs. Every incident had been explained away, covered up, forgotten, but not by everyone. I found Dr. Martinez's name in Sarah's old medical records, the emergency room doctor who'd treated her black eye. When I called his office, claiming to be a nursing student researching family medical history, he agreed to speak with me. "I remember that case," he said, after I explained which incident I was asking about. The injury pattern was inconsistent with the story the family gave. The girl claimed she'd walked into a door, but the bruising suggested a focused blow from a fist or similar object. "Did you document your suspicions?" "I noted them in the medical record, yes. Standard protocol when something doesn't add up. But the patient was an adult, and she insisted it was an accident. There wasn't much more I could do." More evidence for my growing file. Tyler had been systematically hurting female family members for years, and the medical community had been documenting it. They just hadn't connected the dots because the incidents were spread across different hospitals, different doctors, different explanations. But I was connecting them now. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was scrolling through Tyler's old social media posts, looking for anything that might reveal his true nature, when I found a photo from 2 years ago. Tyler with his arm around a pretty brunette girl, both of them smiling at a campus event. The caption read, "With my brilliant pre-med girlfriend Brooke, future doctors in love." Brooke Martinez. I remembered Madison mentioning her once, Tyler's ex-girlfriend who transferred schools suddenly during their junior year. The family story was that she couldn't handle the academic pressure, but looking at this photo, I wondered if there was more to it. Finding her took 3 days of careful social media stalking and cross-referencing class rosters from Tyler's university. When I finally located her Instagram account, my hands were shaking as I typed the message. "Hi, Brooke. You don't know me, but I'm Tyler Brennan's cousin. I was recently injured at a family gathering, and I'm trying to understand some things about Tyler's past. Would you be willing to talk?" I sent it before I could lose my nerve, then spent the next 4 hours staring at my phone like it might explode. When the response finally came, it was cautious but curious. "What kind of injury?" I sent her a photo of my bandaged head and a brief explanation of the baseball bat incident. Her reply came within minutes. "Coffee tomorrow. There's a place called Luna's on Central, 2 p.m. Luna's Coffee was exactly the kind of place you'd choose for a conversation you didn't want overheard. Dimly lit, filled with college students wearing headphones, tables spaced far enough apart for privacy. I arrived early and claimed a corner booth, my stomach churning with nerves and anticipation. Hazel Martinez walked in at exactly 2 p.m., and I recognized her immediately from Tyler's old photos. But this version of her was different. Thinner, more watchful, with the kind of hypervigilance I'd seen in trauma patients during my clinical rotations. "Hazel?" She approached my table carefully, like she was ready to run if needed. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I wasn't sure you'd come." She sat down but kept her purse in her lap, her jacket on. "Your message was specific. Tyler hurt you?" "I think so. The family says it was an accident, but the medical evidence suggests otherwise." I pushed a copy of my hospital report across the table. "Skull fracture from what appears to be a direct blow with the baseball bat." Brooke studied the report, her expression growing darker with each line. "They're calling it an accident?" "His mother is leading the damage control. Says I fell and hit the concrete, but I was standing 6 feet away when Tyler swung the bat and somehow it connected with my head." "Jesus!" Brooke looked up at me and I saw recognition in her eyes, the look of someone who'd heard this song before. "How long did they call for help?" Uncle David had to force them to call 911. They wanted to handle it internally. Brooke laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course they did. The Brennan family loves handling things internally. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the medical report. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I dated Tyler for 2 years. In that time, I had 17 separate accidents. 17 emergency room visits, all explained away as clumsiness or bad luck or my own carelessness. Tyler was always there afterwards, so concerned, so helpful, explaining to the doctors what had happened. Did you ever tell anyone it wasn't an accident?
Who would I tell? Tyler was pre-med, honors student, everybody's golden boy. I was just his girlfriend from the wrong side of town, struggling to keep up academically. When I started questioning whether these accidents were really accidents, Tyler's mother had me evaluated by a psychiatrist, for my own good, of course. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. What did the psychiatrist say? That I was suffering from anxiety and possibly some paranoid ideation brought on by academic stress. Carol Brennan had done her homework. She knew exactly how to frame my concerns to make me sound unstable. But you kept the medical records? Brooke pulled out her phone and scrolled through photos. Every x-ray, every doctor's note, every prescription for pain medication. I told myself it was for insurance purposes, but deep down I think I knew I might need proof someday. She showed me image after image, broken bones, stitch cuts, bruised ribs, a catalog of Tyler's handiwork, carefully documented and preserved. Why didn't you go to the police? With what evidence? Tyler never hit me in front of witnesses. Every incident had a plausible explanation. And anytime I tried to suggest otherwise, there was Carol Brennan with her psychiatrist friend ready to have me committed for delusions. So you transferred schools? I ran, she said simply. Changed schools, changed my major, changed everything about my life to get away from him. It was the only option I had left. I stared at this brave woman who'd survived 2 years of systematic abuse and found the strength to escape. Brooke, I'm building a case against Tyler, a real case, with medical evidence and witness testimony. Would you be willing to help? Her answer came without hesitation. What do you need? I spent 3 days preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. 3 days organizing evidence, rehearsing arguments, and steeling myself for the moment when I'd have to choose between family harmony and protecting Tyler's future victims. Uncle David helped me prepare like I was going to trial because, in a way, I was. Remember, he said, reviewing my notes one final time, stick to facts. Don't let them derail you with emotions or family guilt. Present the evidence, state your conclusions, and don't back down when they push back. The family meeting was set for Sunday afternoon at my mother's house. Neutral territory, or as neutral as anything could be when half the family was determined to protect a predator. I arrived early to set up, spreading medical records and photographs across Mom's dining room table, like evidence in a courtroom. Aunt Carol arrived first, her face set in the brittle smile she wore when she was about to go to war. Tyler came with her, looking every inch that concerned cousin in his crisp polo shirt and earnest expression. Madison trailed behind them, her eyes downcast, clearly wishing she could be anywhere else. Mom bustled around offering coffee and cookies like this was a normal family gathering, her anxiety radiating off of her in waves. She'd been torn between supporting me and maintaining family peace ever since I'd told her what I suspected about Tyler. Uncle David took his position near the window, arms crossed, every inch the retired cop ready to maintain order. His presence was the only thing that made me feel safe in a room with Tyler. Well, Aunt Carol said, settling into her chair with the air of someone prepared to endure a necessary unpleasantness. What's this about, Hazel? Your mother said you had some concerns about the accident? It wasn't an accident, I said simply. Tyler hit me with that baseball bat deliberately, and I have the medical evidence to prove it. The silence that followed was electric. Tyler's mask of concern never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation, assessment. Hazel, I know head injuries can cause confusion and false memories. Maybe you should talk to someone professional about these feelings you're having. There it was, the same gaslighting technique he'd used on Brooke. Make the victim sound unstable, suggest they need psychiatric help, position himself as the reasonable one trying to help. I've talked to medical professionals, I replied, pulling out Dr. Wright's report. Multiple emergency room doctors have confirmed that my injury pattern is consistent with being struck by a baseball bat, not from falling on concrete. I placed the medical report in the center of the table. Furthermore, I've discovered that this isn't the first time Tyler has accidentally injured female family members. Aunt Carol's composure cracked slightly. That's a very serious accusation, Hazel. It's not an accusation, it's a documented pattern. I spread out the photos I'd compiled, medical records going back 3 years, 17 separate incidents involving female relatives and friends of Tyler's, all explained away as accidents or clumsiness. Tyler leaned forward to examine the photos, and for just a moment his mask slipped completely. I saw pride in his expression, satisfaction at his handiwork. Then the concerned cousin was back, shaking his head sadly. "This is heartbreaking," he said. "Hazel, you're seeing patterns that don't exist. These were all separate incidents, separate accidents. You're connecting dots that have no connection." "Then explain Brooke Martinez." The name hit like a physical blow. Tyler went very still, and Aunt Carol's face went white. Tyler's ex-girlfriend, the one who transferred schools suddenly during junior year. She's documented 17 separate accidents during their 2-year relationship. "Brooke was troubled," Aunt Carol said quickly, "mentally unstable. We tried to help her, but she had issues." "She has medical records, Carol. X-rays, doctor's notes, pictures of injuries, all of them consistent with physical abuse, all of them occurring while she was dating your son."
Madison spoke for the first time since arriving. "I remember Brooke." Her voice was barely a whisper. "She was always getting hurt, always having accidents." "Madison." Tyler's voice carried a warning edge that made everyone in the room tense. But Madison kept talking, her words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. "She used to ask me if Tyler ever hurt me, if he ever got rough when he was angry. I told her no because I was scared, but what?" Uncle David prompted gently. Madison looked directly at her brother for the first time. "But you did hurt me. You hurt me all the time. You just made sure no one else was watching." The confession shattered whatever remained of the family's carefully maintained denial. Tyler's face cycled through emotions, surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on cold fury. "You little bitch," he said quietly. "After everything I've done for you, everything this family has given you, and you're gonna side with her?" The mask was completely gone now. This was Tyler's true face, entitled, cruel, absolutely convinced of his right to hurt anyone who inconvenienced him. "There it is," Uncle David said quietly. "There's the real Tyler Brennan." Aunt Carol was on her feet, her voice shrill with panic. "This is ridiculous. You're all ganging up on Tyler because you're jealous of his success. Hazel, you've never been able to accept that Tyler is special, that he's going places you'll never reach. He's going to medical school, where he'll have access to vulnerable patients, where he'll have authority and trust and the ability to hurt people who can't fight back." "That's enough." Aunt Carol's voice cut like a knife. "I won't sit here and listen to you destroy my son's future based on coincidences and the ravings of unstable women." She turned to my mother. "Diane, you need to control your daughter. If she continues with these lies, if she tries to contact Tyler's medical school or the police, there will be consequences. Legal consequences." Mom had been silent through most of the confrontation, torn between loyalty to her sister and protecting her daughter. But Aunt Carol's threat seemed to snap something inside her. "Get out." "Excuse me?" "Get out of my house, both of you." Mom's voice was stronger now, more certain. "I've listened to enough. Hazel has medical evidence, witness testimony, and a pattern of behavior going back years, and instead of being horrified that your son has been hurting people, you're threatening my daughter." Tyler stood slowly, his fury barely contained. "You're making a mistake, Hazel. All of you are making a mistake. I have a future ahead of me, important work to do. I won't let you destroy that. Your future includes hurting vulnerable people. I won't let you do that." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't over." As they left, Aunt Carol hissed one final threat. "If any of this gets out, if Tyler's medical school placement is threatened,
I will sue you for defamation. I will destroy you financially and socially. You'll have nothing left." After they were gone, the house felt hollow, like the aftermath of a tornado. Madison sat, crying quietly, finally free to express the fear she'd been carrying for years. Mom held her, murmuring apologies for not protecting her sooner. Uncle David looked at me with something like pride. "You did good, kid. That took real courage." But I didn't feel courageous. I felt terrified. Tyler's final words echoed in my mind. This isn't over. Whatever came next, I knew it was going to be worse than what had come before. The family was fractured beyond repair, but maybe that was necessary. Maybe some things needed to be broken before they could be rebuilt properly. I gathered up my evidence, my medical records and photographs and timeline of Tyler's violence. Tomorrow, I would take it all to the police station. Tomorrow, I would contact Johns Hopkins Medical School. Tomorrow, I would make sure Tyler Brennan never got the chance to hurt anyone else. But tonight, I would sit with my mother and my cousin and my uncle, and we would grieve for the family we'd lost and the innocence we'd never really had. Because sometimes the most important battles are fought not against strangers, but against the people who share your blood and your name and your history of silence. Monday morning, I walked into the Phoenix Police Department with Uncle David by my side, and a manila folder thick with evidence under my arm. Detective Sarah Chen listened to our story with the same professional detachment I'd learned to recognize in medical settings, skeptical but thorough, taking notes without judgment. The challenge with family assault cases is establishing intent and pattern, she explained after reviewing my documentation. You've done impressive work compiling this timeline. Uncle David leaned forward. What are our next steps? Medical evaluation by the department's forensic team, formal statements from Ms. Martinez and any other victims willing to come forward, and a deeper investigation into Tyler Brennan's background. 2 days later, Dr. Wright called with news that made my blood run cold. Tyler's been asking questions about you at the hospital. Specifically, he wanted to know about your mental health history and whether you've been prescribed any psychiatric medications. He's trying to discredit me. It's worse than that. He posed as a medical student doing research, used official letterhead from Johns Hopkins. That's identity fraud, Hazel. He's escalating.
Tyler's campaign to destroy my credibility was swift and vicious. Within a week, rumors were circulating through the extended family that I was having a breakdown, that I'd become obsessed with Tyler out of jealousy, that my head injury had caused psychological damage. He'd gotten to Madison again. She called crying, saying Tyler had shown her evidence of my instability, threatened to have her committed if she kept supporting my delusions. "He has photos," she sobbed over the phone. "Pictures of me from when I was hospitalized for anxiety last year. He says he'll show them to everyone, tell people I'm crazy too." The cruelest part was how plausible Tyler made it all sound. A nursing student with a head injury, jealous of her successful cousin, manufacturing a conspiracy to bring him down. Even some family members who'd initially supported me began to waver. But Tyler made one critical mistake. In his desperation to silence me, he overplayed his hand. The end came faster than I'd expected. Tyler's attempt to access my medical records illegally triggered an automatic fraud alert at the hospital. Dr. Wright's formal complaint to Johns Hopkins, combined with Detective Chen's investigation, created a paper trail even Tyler couldn't manipulate away. The medical school launched their own investigation. Brooks' testimony, backed by 17 documented injuries, proved impossible to dismiss. Madison found the courage to speak again, this time with Uncle David and a victim's advocate by her side. Tyler's acceptance to Johns Hopkins was revoked on a Thursday. By Friday, local news had picked up the story of the medical school predator whose pattern of family violence had finally been exposed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler's own arrogance had provided the evidence needed to stop him. His illegal attempts to discredit his victims had created a federal case. His mother's threats had been recorded and documented. His mask had slipped so completely that even his former supporters couldn't defend him. Standing outside the courthouse after Tyler's arraignment, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not just relief or vindication, but the profound satisfaction of knowing that speaking truth to power actually worked sometimes. The golden boy was finally seen for what he really was. 6 months later, I graduated nursing school with honors and a special recognition for patient advocacy. Tyler Brennan was serving 18 months for assault and fraud, permanently banned from medical school applications. The golden boy's shine had finally tarnished beyond repair. But this story isn't really about Tyler's downfall. It's about what I learned when I stopped being silent. I learned that medical knowledge isn't just about treating symptoms, it's about recognizing patterns, documenting evidence, and speaking up when something doesn't add up. My nursing training saved me from becoming another accident statistic. I learned that family loyalty becomes toxic when it protects predators at the expense of victims. Real family, like Uncle David, like my mother who chose truth over comfort, stands with survivors, not abusers. Most importantly, I learned that breaking generational silence takes courage, but it also creates ripple effects. Madison is thriving in college now, studying psychology and working with campus assault prevention programs. Brooke returned to pre-med with renewed determination. 3 other family members have come forward about Tyler's past accidents. Where are you right now listening to this? What story are you carrying that feels too big, too complicated, too dangerous to tell? Drop a comment below because I read every single one. Your instincts matter, your voice matters, your truth matters. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to stay quiet about the things that hurt you. Sometimes breaking the silence saves not just yourself, but everyone who comes after you. If you've been made to feel small, crazy, or alone, you're not. There are people who will believe you, support you, and help you build a case for your own worth. Trust your gut, document everything, find your allies. And remember, predators count on your silence. Don't give it to them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.